In today's episode, we have David Morgan. Billionaire Eric Sprott said that David Morgan is one of the top 3 silver analysts in the entire world. We're going to talk about gold, silver, the macroeconomic collapse that is and was in slow motion, but is now speeding up. The sponsor for today's video is Vizsla Silver. So I want to thank Vizsla Silver for always being a valued sponsor here on our channel, one of our favorite silver mining stocks. So thanks, Vizsla. Make sure you hit the like button on this video, send it out in the YouTube universe. Give us a comment down below if you enjoyed today's episode. Be sure to check out themorganreport.com. David is not only, according to billionaire Eric Sprott, one of the top silver analysts in the world, but he also runs a fantastic newsletter. It's right there down below at themorganreport.com. And it's good to see you, sir.
Well, Jake, it's good to be with you. Thanks.
Yes, nice to see you again. So I got to think it's pretty interesting for you. You've been talking about all of this controlled demolition of not only America, but of the global societal and financial system for quite some time. And seems like we're certainly starting to see it.
Well, Jake, excuse me, but I'd say that's a rather big understatement. Yes, we started seeing it some time ago, with my professional work, but as many others have. But it's pretty apparent for everybody now, unless you're totally asleep, and there are people that are totally asleep. There are people that will never really wake up to the reality that most of us are experiencing.
So what's the reality we're starting to experience? Where are we at?
Well, we are in a good evil battle. We're in a white hat, black hat battle, if you want to think in that terminology. It is good versus evil. And we have on the evil side a small group of extremely wealthy people without a conscience, sociopaths, psychopaths, or maybe even something else. I mean, it's been conjectured. I'm not saying I agree with it, but I couldn't rule it out entirely. Off-site entities, demons, spiritual forces that are outside of the human experience, generally speaking. So anyway, whatever it is, or group, they're very small and they're in control, and they're trying to basically make a totalitarian state of the entire planet. And they want to rule that overlord system, basically every breathing being. And at the same time that that's happening, they're also modifying nature. They're modifying atmosphere. They're modifying foods through GMO. They're modifying the water supply. They've certainly done a great deal through pharmakeia, the pharmacy industry. So it's, as you know, and I know there's pros and cons on Alex Jones, but, Alex, certainly like any human, has his flaws. But when he coined Prison Planet and InfoWars, I don't think anyone could have done a better job than Alex. That's exactly what it's become, Prison Planet. And the war is really the war of information. So that's my summary.
I was just with Alex 2 days ago. So yeah, it is kind of eerie. You think about this idea of the prison planet, because when you take a step back and you look at the rollout of central bank digital currency, and now pretty openly discussion of social credit score systems. Canada's talked a lot about having social credit scores for corporations. There's been legislation proposed, even in the state of Utah, for a digital ID that would include some aspects of social credit score. We've had World Economic Forum talking about a centralized internet identification for each individual in order to quote, stop misinformation. So you can see how this total control grid is set up through many factors, the economic system not being the only one. And so I wonder, where do you think we go from here?
Well, it's undetermined. And where we go is up to, the individual. It's up to the collective as well. What that means is, there are people, and I hate to use this example, but I think it will probably wake some people up. And I know everyone watching your channel and my channel are what we refer to as awake. But, when this woman in Australia, I think it was in Melbourne, lit herself on fire, to protest the government tyranny. I mean, that's an individual that made a choice that, for in her mind and heart, she did it to as a protest statement, as a martyrdom. And then, of course, it could be, you know, groups. I mean, you could have a state, like we'll take Idaho as an example, that says, look, we are states' rights are above federal rights. We don't care what the pretendency says, the dementia patient, whatever it is, uh, that's there, and all that, the administration, probably a better way to say it. I don't want to pick on Brandon too much, but the idea is that state rights are superior to federal rights, and we are not going to go along with these mandates, which aren't law anyway. And so I think that's the main thing I see. I was asked this on another interview a couple of days ago, Jake, and that's my conjecture. Is it correct or incorrect? I don't know, but we definitely can see it. We see it in two ways. We see some states pushing back. We also can see mass migration, or maybe mass is too big a word, but certainly migration. A lot of people that are leaving certain states that are very heavy-handed, moving to states that are much more open, and that trend will continue. So, again, there's a lot at stake here. I mean, as far as I'm personally concerned, there's nothing more valuable than freedom. It's priceless. It's not equal to, so many ounces of gold or so many tons of silver or so many bushels of wheat. Freedom is priceless. There's nothing more sacred. And that's why the founding fathers said they were willing to give up their fortunes in sacred honor for it, because they knew that in the heart of men and women, that it was impossible to live a life if you didn't have it as a free person.
All around, we're seeing governments and central banks moving in lockstep. It seems like they're all following a similar plan, and it begs the question: is this movement from this inflationary pattern, from this uh, medical biotyranny, um, is this a coordinated effort? And if so, how does it tie into your research over the last 20 or so, 30 or so, 40 or so years you've been studying this pretty much your whole adult life?
Yeah, and thanks for asking. I'll have to classify this under my opinion because there's so many vectors you touched on. So I'll refer back to Max Egan. Max and I are friends, and he talks about all the governments are basically a criminal conspiracy or a criminal cabal. They all work together, even though we're taught we've got this boogeyman over in Russia or China or whatever. I'm not convinced. I would say they're all criminal enterprises. At least that's how it appears. And what I don't know is the absolute truth, and that could be that you act as a disinformation agent and you look as if you are on one side when really you're on another side. And this is done in a spy game all the time, or there's a double agent or a triple agent. And so I do keep that in mind. I do know from the first level, it does look like all of these things that are going on globally are made most readily available through whatever the government structure is, be it communist China or Russia or South America somewhere or North America. It doesn't really matter. So, is it a coordinated? Yes, but the resistance is there, and it is. I certainly wouldn't say winning. I'm too conservative to say, the white hats are in charge and it's all just acting out. Get your popcorn and watch it unfold. I'm not in that camp. I am in the camp that the evidence shows clearly that the white hats have certainly made progress. Um, I don't think it's going, any particular direction at this point. What's always concerned me, I've written about several times, mostly in my private work, but publicly as well, is that when you're going against, a criminal element, they have no rules, and they will, as a metaphor, turn over the card table to win, burn it to the ground, stomp it down. I mean, if it took, and this is my thoughts. I mean, if it took, burning, the adage of burning it to the ground, when you are a hostile takeover of of a town in the old west or whatever, just nothing left standing. I think that's their attitude, and they're only going to left standing, what they require to keep in their privileged lifestyles or whatever. One thing I wanted to add on, a couple things really. One is the AI, the artificial intelligence, which I'm still learning about. I really don't have a big enough of an understanding to comment too much on it, other than that is kind of the control mechanism that's taking over most of these criminal enterprises known as governments. And the other one is the technocracy, basic in what I did touch on briefly, and that's pharmakia, or really more than just the drugs. It's now become mechanically in place where we have, nanobots and, stuff that can be used for both good and evil. I'll certainly acknowledge that. But we have a situation where we have the ability to modify humans well beyond what we would have dreamed about, say, 2 decades ago. Now we've got this, sort of brave new world atmosphere where you can be enhanced at different levels, and that will continue, and it's accelerating. It's far beyond what most people believe, due to the fact of how DARPA and other deep state types around the world do their mission assignments, and the public is usually about 10, 20 years behind the actuality. So if you know anything about super soldiers, and the little bit that you would know as a layman, and then just think about that trend, you'll have a pretty good idea of what the possibilities are for those that remain within this new technocratic culture that's rapidly forming before our eyes.
Jeff Berwick, he wrote a book called The Controlled Demolition of the American Empire. Do you believe that this is a controlled demolition? And if so, what are the next dominoes that these ruling elites are intending to push down the line to continue their plan of creating a more top-down control system?
Yes and no. Yes, I do believe that they believe that it's controlled demolition, and they have probably a pretty good outline. The main one would be depopulation. Could be through several methods. One would be, of course, some type of illness situation that takes out people. Another would be food, inability to get food, or
Like supply chain shortages, you mean?
Yeah, right. And yes, and then just stress. I mean, like the woman in Australia I referred to moments ago, there'll be a certain factor of, I don't know what percentage, but will increase, that basically people become absolutely hopeless and they see no reason, and so they're gone. And so if there have been multiple factors, so yes, is it controlled demolition? Yes. The other part of my no is that the ability to control people is not 100%. There are always people that will resist. There are people that are smarter than the controllers in many cases. There are people that can do things in overt or covert ways. Covert being some patriotic type, or let's see, freedom lovers. I mean, sometimes the patriot word's overused, but they would come in and be able to modify systems, software that could eventually get into hardware and cause, let's say, the old adage, a wrench in the gears. And so that's a possibility, and certainly I would believe strongly is happening as we speak. So the outcome isn't determined, and the trend is very clear. I do believe going out a few years that the population, particularly in the United States, will probably be much less than it is now. I think it'll be global as well. I think it's a lot easier if you've got an energy problem and you don't have enough oil for the planet. If the planet's population was cut in half and the oil supply remained the same, I think you catch my drift. All of a sudden, you don't have an energy problem anymore. So, I mean, I'm not trying to be cute. I really do think these things through deeply, and it really upsets me in a way. But
No, you're certainly being less cute than usual.
Yeah, well, the thing is that I don't have a lot of time left. I don't think I'm not but I'll be 70 here pretty soon, and I think the older you get, the more you realize how precious life is, and what you can do. And I've been rather reserved. I mean, I've been very outspoken on the monetary system, and and what's gone on there for years. I've made my career mostly around that topic. But people like you, and I hope this doesn't sound too egotistical, know that I'm a pretty deep thinker and I think well beyond the monetary space. It's just my specialty because almost everything revolves around money. I mean, the whole mark of the beast has only revolves around many, many things. It's control, but what does the main control? The main control you can't buy or sell without it. So
So do you think the mark of the beast specifically is a central bank digital currency social credit score system that excludes you from society?
I wouldn't say yes yet. It certainly looks as if that's going to be it, but it keeps changing. I think it's more of a system alliance rather than the actual implementation. So as long as you sign over your soul to the evil one or evil ones, you're in the system. So it could be through a cell phone, it could be through a tattoo, it could be through a RFID chip. I don't think the mechanism is as important as that you align yourself with the system.
Got it. Got it. Interesting. Yeah, no, I appreciate where we're, you and I have become friends off air, obviously, because we think about the same things much different than just the monetary system, and more so than usual. I understand where you're coming from, and more so than usual, you weren't holding any of your punches, and so I wonder. And that's fine with me. I wish more people would go there. More people are afraid of. Uh, they want to uphold their career or their brand, and so they're off. Most topics are off limits, and so I wonder, what do you think then? How do you think it plays out here in America? You know, Normally people just talk about, our crowd just talks about the financial system, but the other components of the supply chain disruptions, the labor shortages. My mother-in-law just said about a half hour ago that she banks with I think she said she banks with like Wells Fargo or something, and they shut down the Wells Fargo in town that she normally goes to. Um, One of my favorite restaurants, they actually shut down dinner altogether. They now close at 4 o'clock. And the manager was so sad because dinner is their highest grossing time, but they don't have the staff they literally can't do it.
Yeah.
And so when you factor that in and you factor in the incredible supply chain shortages and as you mentioned, the energy crisis, then you couple that with the incredible rate at which inflation is really moving. I mean, you're kind of setting up for uh, quite an interesting dynamic. I'm wondering if you could touch on that for us as Americans.
You bet. So I did mention it a little bit about states' rights and states basically taking back their power. I'll give credit to two people. It would be Cliff High, SOC, Self-Organizing Collectives, and James Howard Kunstler. I think it's World by Hand. James, I got your book's name wrong. Forgive me. The whole idea is that we break down into smaller and smaller communities.
Hmm.
And I'm going to digress for a moment to make this point stronger. When I was in China, there's an expression, I cannot speak Chinese, but the idea is that the emperor is very far away. So a lot of rural China doesn't really give a dang about what's going on in Beijing because they're too busy doing what they've always done for hundreds of years, right? So it's sort of that attitude that as the authority figures becomes more authoritarian, that's only in the people that they have control over. Well, what does that mean? It means basically your large city structures, your IoT, the Internet of Things. When you're connected to the beast system, they have ultimate control. And there's some people who do it gladly. I mean, they will. They will say, and then there'll be outliers that won't do it at all. And those will organize themselves into different groups, tribes, townships, whatever you want to call it. So that's what I see happening. I don't think you're going to see an overlay of everyone that doesn't go along with the new system is immediately, gone. I think that there will be groups, and it'll be subtle. As I said, it's not real subtle, but the amount of Californians, especially business people, that said, I can't take it anymore and set up shop in a different state where the state tax system and some of these really aren't even laws, but legislative ideas that are put down on a piece of paper that people think they have to follow. Just say enough is enough and they leave. So there is it's again a good and evil situation. And I'm very free market, as you know, Jake. You know me now pretty well, and you and I've gotten closer than than many people. Uh, I do believe you should make your own choice. The problem I have with the system is you're predisposed to make a certain choice because the indoctrination system from basically birth on. And once you are part of the mindset where you're very open to the world as a young child, once you get in this, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 kind of thing, and you are indoctrinated by the schooling system and you're taught to believe rather than taught to think, you have a society that can be much more easily controlled. And unfortunately, that's exactly where we are. There aren't too many people that would, have a Montessori or Steiner or whatever type of education where, a young person was taught to, think critically, question authority, don't accept anything at face value just because it looks to be true, it not necessarily is. And of course, this is the type of thinking that really creates a free, dynamic, and very robust and wealthy society. When you're given a choice of the red dress or the green dress, well, of course you have choice. And in reality, you don't. You get in the system, and the more it becomes normal. One of the problems, as I see it, and I'm not, I don't have a degree in philosophy, but not that you need one. But when you're taught that having the choice between the red and the green dress is actually freedom, you've lost it, and a lot of people believe that, and unfortunately, it continues as we speak. So there's not too many people to push back. It's great to sit here in my office, be fairly comfortable and spew, great ideas, or I think they're good. Great might be too strong an adjective, but the idea is easy. It's when I can't go to the grocery store, or I can't get fuel, or my heat's been turned off, or the type of things I think are ahead of us. That's the test there, because a lot of people that can stand strong now when everything is semi normal, once you start turning the screws down further and harder, a lot of people will acquiesce that never planned to. And that's tough. And I get that. I understand it. It's replete through history. It's seen again and again and again. And, I have to be honest. If it gets that hard and that tough on me, will I? I think with all that I've been through and see in my age, I don't think I would, you know, give in to my principles that I've lived my entire life. I really don't. But nonetheless, there's some people that might. And that's it. I mean, you've asked some really tough questions, but I've given you some really hard answers. And again, you were referring to, well, you kind of come out a little stronger. And I started doing that recently because, when you're getting to that 15th round and it's pretty neck and neck, and you only got one more, 3 minutes to go. If you don't give it all you've got in that last round, I want to finish strong. Even if I end up on the mat and I'm down, I finished with everything I had. That's kind of my attitude these days, Jake. So I'm, ripping it a little bit more. Still want to stay within the boundaries of the technocratic algorithms that will, take a certain word or words and ban you or shadow ban you or whatever. So,
Yeah, I think that what you said is important. I think that, and I'm glad that we're having this conversation because, all of us need to focus our energy just as much or more so on the mind war and the spirit wars and preparing ourselves mentally, emotionally, and spiritually because um, that's what the battle is really about more so than anything. And the medium through which that battle is taking place happens to be inflation, supply chain disruptions, totalitarianism, censorship. These are the mediums of it. But the battle is really over the mind and soul. And that's why it's important for us to strengthen ourselves emotionally, mentally, spiritually, connect to whatever you believe, God, your family, whatever it is for you, and prepare yourself. Now, one of the reasons that I think that this is really important is because um, of how much harder life could get for a lot of people. Some people will be unaffected by it to some degree, and I mean that with regards to the supply chain and food shortages. And I wanted to talk about that because for 2 years, I mean, you've been sending me stuff on that well before it was really a thing, even where the only shortage was just toilet paper. And you were sending me stuff all the time on it where I'm like, damn, I hope David's not right about this. And so this is something you've been following closely. And I was wondering if we could talk a little bit about that, how it fits into the larger picture of what's going on in the world and where you think it's headed.
Sure. I think I've got the movie right. I think it's called Demolition Man. I believe it's with Sylvester Stallone. But, in that movie, that science fiction movie, what happens is all of the mom and pops are gone. The only thing that exists are the corporate stores. And within the corporate stores, there's wars. So you get down, if I remember the movie correctly, I think it's Taco Bell is like the only, fast food entity that's alive and well at that time. And then also you're dinged if you use, if you use an F bomb, you're really in trouble. But if you use damn or something, you get your social credit score goes down. So even though it's somewhat of a comedy, there's a lot of ideas in that movie that show very closely to where we are right now, where we're headed. That's where I think we're headed. You have to be politically correct. Again, I think I said it better a moment ago. I mean, you're going to have to sign into the system or not. If you want any vestige of freedom, you're going to have a lifestyle that's probably closer to the 1880s than it is the 1980s. And there are people that will do that. And there are people that won't. And I'm not sure you'll really have a choice. I think that you'll be able to make your own way, as I said, with the self-organizing collectives, the people that live out in rural areas that are just too far out. There is no smart city and it's too expensive, and authority figures are just going to not bother. With all the modifications we've done with the soils and everything else, they're not going to last much longer anyway. We'll just let them go. Kind of. So that's my take. Now, I always I love to be right most of the time or all the time, but as new data comes in, you've got to change your mind. I mean, at first I was thinking, meaning a decade or more, probably 15 years ago, it was more of a battle of political ideals between, being conservative or what's now called liberal. Really, I'm a classic liberal, but stop at that. And it wasn't until I met Pat Wood, and he lived in Coeur d'Alene at the time. He's now in Arizona, and started really a one-man show on technocracy. And Pat and I were pretty close, deep thinker. I love, intellectuals, especially ones that think outside the box and caused me to think of things I never even, would have thought of without their help. And so I think he's got it right, or very close to right, as far as what's really going on. It's not about left or right. It's not about red or blue. It's about
It's basically become about freedom and non-freedom is what it's really come down to. Because
freedom and slavery.
I would have I would never define myself as left or right. I've always been a very anti-political person.
Right.
And I grew up in California, and I lived in Hawaii. I grew up in, most of my time was spent in the most liberal of areas. And I never, really had a problem with it until those became the least free areas. But what I've noticed is I find people on both ends, left and right, that if I sit down with them, we really think pretty much the same. And that's why I say I feel like it's just become freedom and non-freedom.
Yeah, I think so. And I'll shout out to Larkin Rose. I mean, I think Larkin, in my strong opinion, is probably the best at maintaining a very composed and grounded way of just listening, which most people want to be heard and really listening, and being able to get at the root belief of most people. And actually, you're right. I agree. Larkin would, I think, will agree with us that most people really do want to be able to be free, to be able to make their own choices, make their own way, make their own decisions, and not have, the nanny state controlling everything. It's really easy. I look at it um, from many perspectives, but one is, an adult-child relationship. A child is totally dependent on the parent for a certain number of years. And then through the teenage years, it happens earlier for some and later for others, but somewhere in the teenage years, these kids rebel because it's natural for them to go out on their own and make their own way. But in our system, you're brought in as a subject or slave or a piece of meat controlled by the state, and it remains that way your entire life. Some people like it because they don't have to make any decisions and they can play victim their entire lives because anything that goes wrong is because someone did it to them, and it's up to the state to remedy their situation. So, in other words, total lack of responsibility. Whereas if you look at how most of the independent and more free thinking societies come up, it's people that will take responsibility. And that's really a more free way to live. It's no one wants to make a big mistake that costs them, property or God forbid life or, their crop or, their new invention or, whatever. But nonetheless, if it was of their own making and they take responsibility for them, there's a great lesson in that. And move on. When you have to stay stuck in the idea that it's only because of a certain political class that you are the way you are. 'Cause again, it's all in your head. I mean, most of the stuff, like I said at the beginning, the emperor is very far away. I mean, in a way, you're as free as your mindset. Now, of course, that's not totally true, but there is merit in that. If you're running around depressed because there's a certain critter in the White House, you're doing that to yourself. You know, I mean, what changed? Did all the restaurants in town change? Did the churches go away? Did the gym leave? No, all those things are there. It's just because somebody is out there in this pretendency or whatever's going on, it's going to make your life miserable. Well, you're making your life miserable. So this is, I know you do a lot in that realm more than me, Jake, but yeah, a lot of it has to do with alignment. But these are things that aren't taught. You teach it. You've got your own course, and you let people, wake up and smell the coffee, overused metaphor, to really take control of their own self, your own belief system, your own way you interact with what's out there. But if you're spending a lot of time in your headspace because of something that's out in the future that you don't even know, or something in the past you can't do anything about, you miss the gift. The gift is the present.
Yeah, that's what I believe, and that's what I've been trying to do a better job is just really focus on what I can control, and and I think that that's the message that we should all be preaching right now. Let's talk a little bit more about supply chain. So what's going on with the supply chains, and what do you foresee?
Well, I don't know how much it's controlled or not controlled. Looks as if some of it is controlled with certain restrictions and people that have an illness and have to quarantine, and that stops the cargo, containers moving and all that. So I've been saying before that we had a huge contraction in the global economy, and that's true. And the shipping container or supply chain breakdown is just part of that equation. I think it's going to continue. I think we're going to get to a level where, like any function that you can put a math equation to, or just observation, draw a line, it'll ebb and flow. It'll get better for a while, and then it will go downhill, and it will reach an equilibrium at some point. But I don't think that equilibrium will be reached until the population density is a different level than it is now. I mean, that's substantially.
Yeah, makes sense. So how about let's talk a little bit about the financial system, and most specifically, let's talk about the incredible rate at which currency is now devaluing, um, i.e., inflation. Everyone sees it. You and I hadn't chatted on an interview in a while, but I've been thinking recently, people that would have no interest in a conversation about inflation or money printing, and they seem to be waking up quite drastically. People that would maybe even call inflation in this type of, if they print all this money, it's going to collapse the currency. That's a conspiracy theory. It seems like everybody, it doesn't matter who you are, everybody realizes prices of everything's going up. And most people are starting to realize the consequences of money printing, in my opinion. I just got an IV, a mobile IV here at the house. And the woman was talking about how the labor shortages are so bad in town. And it's because um, they're paying people not to work, and then ultimately we're the ones that are paying for it because they're devaluing the currency, which and then taking off debt for it. And I was like, wow, I feel like I'm like, wow, it just seems like a lot of people are starting to realize this is not good. What do you make of the state of inflation? Where do you make of where it's going from here? We've had the 180 moves by Yellen and the rest of the characters, Jerome Powell saying it's transitory, to turning into it's no longer transitory, turning into NBC money, saying it's actually good for you. I'm not sure if you saw that bit by Jim Cramer the other day after the White House sent out their memo, obviously, to the news to start talking about how good the economy is. And this was like 3 days ago, and Jim Cramer's like in this weird position. Looks like he's like, snorting something. And then all of a sudden he just goes, "This is the best economy ever," and he's like all like that. And, so it's been interesting to watch. So what do you make of it all? And is it transitory? Is it going to stop? Is there going to be an equilibrium, or where do we go?
Yeah, isn't that the question I think we all want to know? Well, there's an adage that all inflations end in deflation. The No inflation is ever carried on indefinitely, and we are
Huh.
at the death throes of this one, the great inflationary experiment that's gone on and on and on through history. I mean, it's just so many times. The end is pretty clear. I've said it so many times, three words: all fiat fails. Of course, this time it's global because the dollar is the reserve currency of the world. And I think I just got an email I read that I guess Cliff Hyde mentioned something about currency destruction, and all of them would fail, with the exception of the Russian ruble. Um, I won't go there. I haven't thought about it enough. But where we're going is to a new system. And the question I have is, how fast can it be implemented? So the Chinese really are ahead of the Western central bankers, the Anglo American Axis, as I refer to it, uh, having their system in all their cities. Again, the IoT, the Internet of Things, where 400 million Chinese, so the population of the US is about 350 million, so greater than the population of the US, basically have no cash, cashless society, and everything's done with their Tencent or Weenie or whatever the app is. Everything's done digitally with their currency for the most part. In other words, they've implemented their own central bank digital currency. And I don't know how far down the road it is. I know it was a test case for a long time, but they have basically total control. And that's based on your social credit score more than what your funds in the bank are. Because if you have great funds in the bank and you aren't aligned with the political ideals of the Chinese Communist Party, it doesn't matter how much money you've got. You can't get the hotel or buy the meal or ride the bus or whatever. So that's kind of the test case for the globe. That's the way that the control mechanism wants it to go. That's a technocracy. Will we get there or not? That's the big question we've discussed this whole interview. I don't think it will. As I said twice before, there'll be some collectives that will just opt out, and they'll be so small and scattered and so meaningless in power, as far as power to disrupt the great AI, that they'll just be ignored. And again, they'll be ignored from the aspect that they don't really matter and they have such a hard life who'd want it anyway, and they'll be left alone. And the idea, my thought pattern is that, well, they're not going to last much longer anyway. Who can, build a log cabin, in Minnesota and live out 4 winters in a row?
So, yeah, I believe that if you build enough sources of income through as many diversified means as possible, then you're giving yourself a great shot for whatever happens. I'm of a similar camp. I cannot see, specifically America. I cannot see most of America willingly adopting this. Um, uh, Although I could be wrong, but I guess it's to be determined how the rest of this unfolds. When you say, though, if we go back to the finance, you said we're at the end game of this inflationary financial system and all fiats fail. Is it and then you say, how long is the gap between the new system? Is it that you think we just keep going down this inflationary road and then they say, here's the new solution, and they try to offer this central bank digital currency as the new solution? Or how do you see that? What is your opinion on how the end game unfolds?
I think that's it. That's my take so far. Again, if I get more, data or whatever, I hate to use the word data overused, but yeah, that's exactly how I see it. And it'll be very alluring. I mean, it'll be, so anyone that has debt in the, call it mortgage debt, credit card debt, student loan debt, whatever, all you have to do is sign on, sign over, and it may be signing over to the system, right? And those debts will be forgiven. We're starting a new thing, and based on your age or whatever, who knows? They may just give a UBI lump sum. So if you're, if all of a sudden your mortgage is gone, your student loan debt is gone, and you get a lump sum of X, Fed credits, because it's all credit, it's not really money, that. And you're on your way, that's very alluring for a lot of people. Now, that's just my take at this point. It's more of a metaphor than a reality, but I'm giving you the idea that they will make it alluring. How alluring, I don't know. Will they do loan or debt forgiveness? I don't know. I suspect they will in some cases. And once you're in, you can't get out.
How does the Internet of Things and the Internet of Bodies connect into it? You've talked a couple times about the Internet of Things. So how does the Internet of Things and the Internet of Bodies connect into this overarching central bank digital currency, social credit score type of system?
Well, your calories will be monitored in your Internet of your body, and that will be on the Internet of Things. So that joke that was on the internet about a decade ago or maybe longer, where the guy calls up Domino's to order a pizza, and the AI answers the phone, sounds like a person, says, I want to buy a supreme pizza, whatever it is. Oh, you can't. What do you mean I can't? Well, because your cholesterol score is this high and you ordered 2 pizzas last month. So you can have the, veggie delight on thin crust, and we're going to only, ship you 700 calories. That's the idea, that your heart rate, your anxiety level, all your hormone base, whatever, will be monitored. And I know I'm going far out right now, so I just want to make that clear to the audience. David, do you really say that? I'm saying that's the projection, that's the trend. I'm not saying that's the reality. It isn't, but that's the potential. I mean, we're that sophisticated on monitoring. I mean, I've got apps on my phone for like my heart rate and stuff. I'll just put my finger on the light, and it'll give me what my exact heart rate is and tell me, a lot of things. And that's just with the phone. Think of got something that's implanted that can monitor, basically everything, and you're not getting a very accurate blood test 24/7 that's reported to the Internet of Things, which can determine what your calorie level is for that day or what the breakdown of food is for that day. Does that sound absolutely Brave New World? It is. Are we going to get there? I don't know. But I am saying, you asked me the question, that's the trend. That's how it works together. You ask me, how does it work together? That's how it works together.
Right. And it's easy to see how something like that could occur or could be proposed if they convince everybody that because they're emitting too much carbon that they're now a danger to everything, especially if the supply chain and food shortages continue simultaneously. Um, so, what do you think is the trajectory for gold, silver, commodities? Do we have an inflationary move forwards? Are we at the end of a barrel and ready for another crash? What do you think?
Tough. I mean, historically, when you had this kind of when historically when you're at this phase of the end of a great inflation, you would see gold and silver really start to move, and we haven't yet. Uh, there's been years of gold and silver suppression in the cognitive map. How people think about it. It's really never brought up much in the mainstream financial press. It's repressed, although the major money center banks still continue to buy gold and add to their holdings. I still think it's important, but I think in the new system they'll just go quickly to however that plays out as we discussed, without any type of intervention with gold and silver. Silver is a little more interesting than gold from the aspect that it's so much required in a high-tech society that they almost can't repress it at some point. And that may still be a decade out. I don't know. Of course, it depends again on population. You've got an oil shortage and half as many people demand oil because either they're missing in action or um, no one can afford a car anymore. And so there's several ways to get there. If that were to occur in silver, of course, the demand would be less because there's less population. But the point is, I still believe that before this whole thing gets moved over to the system, which may never happen, just because that's what they want doesn't mean, just because it's working in China, it doesn't mean it's global. There's going to be pushback. So I still think you'll see a run in metals. I think it will be used more in those self-organizing collectives, those little pockets that we talked about. Could be implemented. I mean, if you go to someone as smart as Mr. Gold, Jim Sinclair, and Bill Holter, they do believe that the bankers dream of a modern money theory, print unlimited, just press the reset button, cancel some debt, forgive sovereign debt, start over. Here it is. Your bank account's now this. We're putting everybody on this new system. You're now directly connected to the Fed. You don't need your local bank. Everything's on your phone or computer, and happy days are here. That's probably their dream, something along those lines. Doesn't necessarily mean it'll be implemented. So lots to be concerned about, but not overly concerned. As you said, we should live in the now and control what we can. One way to control some financial freedom is to have something that makes you financial. And above and beyond cryptos, it's gold or silver. The reason being is that it's not AI induced. In other words, there is no algorithm. There's algorithm for gold and silver paper trading. Let me be clear. Wait a minute, David, what did you say? I'm talking about the physical metal itself that you have in your pocket or your desk drawer in your safe or buried in your backyard. That is free money. That's money that's sovereign. That's money that you control and you make a market in it. And I wanted to say this. I've been thinking about this for the last couple of weeks, Jake. I was, price of silver, this and that. That's the price in officialdom, right? And I'm not trying to make light of it. I mean, that's what I would pay if I were to go call up a dealer right now and say, I want to buy more silver or something. However, in the marketplace, it's a bid-ask proposition. So you could literally go to a used car guy, let's say a private individual is selling a car, and they want X amount of fiat. And you can say, I don't want to pay it. I want to pay it in silver. Well, now you're the market maker in your silver, right? You and he are setting the price. And that's something that most people overlook in the realm of metals. It's like, well, what am I going to do with it? Well, one, hopefully you'll spend some of it to better your life or pay off debt or become more free. And you also have the ability to make a market. I mean, it's not a corny example. It's a real life example. Somebody right now somewhere in the United States is selling a vehicle for silver. I guarantee it. It's not, hundreds of them. It's maybe one or two, but it's happened.
You were talking a little bit about vehicles. Side note, did you see the UK bill proposal to eliminate car ownership?
I did.
That was pretty crazy.
Well, these people are stark raving mad as far as I'm concerned, and they really believe this crap, or at least they're taught to believe it. And, if they don't say it, they don't get their little tick mark at the club. The one thing about being in the club is, as George Carlin referred to it, there's there's this club, and you're not in it.
And you ain't in it.
You ain't in it. And the thing of it is that some of these people that think that they are in it aren't in it. They think they are.
Yeah.
And then when the whole thing comes down, people don't know from history, and it's very clear. Those people are goners. They're like, oh, you think you did your job? Yeah. Well, that's what you were paid to do. And, money means nothing because we put it out of thin air. Goodbye, boom, they're gone. And so all these lower level minions that have selected positions, I won't even say elected anymore, that are spouting the party line, the totalitarian AI-induced party rhetoric that's supposed to brainwash us all into submissiveness. Those people are at the top of the chain of the useless leaders as far as the true elites are concerned.
Did you see Jeff Bezos say that the plan is to turn planet Earth into essentially a national park? Did you see that?
I didn't, but I've been at this a very long time, and I remember when I first started really digging deep, even before the internet, and some of the rule changes in the parks and recreation, or national park. I think it's NPA, National Park Association. I may have that wrong, but the overseeing body for the national park system in the United States and what they were doing, it was pretty clear way back then, if you had eyes to see, that they were going to use eminent domain and all kinds of legal structures that would come in and basically wipe out a lot of living entities that have two eyes, a mouth, and 2 ears, and replace it with nature. So it's very, very interesting what's going on. That's why when we started, I was hinting at, it's almost inconceivable to me that the hierarchy is one as evil as it is, which I've accepted for years now, and that it's all human. That's a little bit hard for me to accept too, and I can. I mean, I can understand it's possible. We're witnessing it, so how could I not? But on the other hand, it does make me think: is there that demonic force involved at that level? And my high suspicion is that there is.
If it is not demonic, it is certainly the highest level of psychopathy. Yeah, here's Jeff Bezos thinks Earth will become a galactic Yellowstone in the future. So he basically says that everyone will have to leave Earth, and it'll basically be like a giant national park, and then all the plebes will be living on like some other planet, basically, and you'll have to leave Earth so they can preserve it back again to this idea of where they're pushing that we're parasitic, toxic people just by being alive. We're destroying Earth, and they have to save Earth, which obviously comes at a cost of our basic freedoms and sovereignty. But yeah, this is in New York Post here, and it's quite interesting.
I have no further comment. I'm not a big fan of Bezos, but I won't be a hypocrite. I buy a lot from Amazon still.
Okay, so let's talk about as we kind of wrap up here. What do you think are some important philosophies for the viewer? What are some important philosophies for me? What are some things that some of the best ways we can prepare ourselves, whether that be financially or spiritually or mentally?
Sure. And I love that part, and I do this often. And when I get an interview, especially if I'm asked to do so. Well, number one, if you go back to the Oracle of Delphi, what was that all about? The knowledge there was to thine own self be true. And that carries a lot of meaning for me. And most people don't have a true sense of self. They've never really had a thought on their own. It's their own unique thought. A lot of people, of course, immediately get, on their hindquarters and say, "Okay, what the hell are you talking about? I think freely all the time." You don't. You've been programmed. You don't know that you've been programmed. You've been programmed to believe that you have free thinking. So to their own self be true means you have to have a sense of self that's what I'd say your innermost self, your deep spiritual being. That's outside of the realm of what our physical reality is. It's what really goes beyond that. If you believe that a soul has the ability to go beyond this life, which there's always that argument, yes or no. If you believe that it does, and you're in tune with that, then you may get more to the core values of what's really meaningful. And most people in life have to experience that a few times. One of the best examples will be a death of somebody that you're very close to. And usually in those moments of true grief, the question comes that we all ask, and that is, what's this all about? What's the purpose? Why am I here? What am I doing? And those things like, I'm 2 months behind on my utility bill, that kind of stuff just drifts away. Yeah, it's still a problem, but it's so infinitesimal in comparison to losing your best friend for life that you'll never see again. That takes real meaning. So these emotions that are really at our core are therefore actually lessons to be learned and lived. So that would be number one. So it would self be true. The other one, I think it was, I won't say who because I don't want to be misquoted. And I think you leave the comments open, which is fine. I don't have time to read them. Most of the comments I answer from two girls in the Philippines anyway. So if you think I'm answering them, just call my girls in the Philippines, complain to them. This too shall pass. I think that's an important one as well. No matter how bleak or how good it looks at a certain point in time, it'll pass. So this idea that this illness is going to be there for, forever. No, it will pass. Will it pass next year? I don't know. But this system that we have will pass. And there's always, two sides of the coin, or really, as David Smith, that works with me, would say, three sides of the coin, right? There's the front, the back, and the side. A lot of variables in life, a lot of random actions. There's a lot of things that a small move can make a big change. One individual can make a difference. Never forget that. There's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. So those would be some of the things I'd spout off at the top of my head. I think the main thing is to be present. And again, I know it goes into some of your philosophy that, life is not a dress rehearsal. When you're out there getting gas, buying groceries at the restaurant, going to a movie, talking with friends at a fire pit, whatever you're doing, you really want to be present. You want to be living. You don't want to be locked in your headspace, worrying about something that you have no control over. It's much better to leave the monkey mind that's so prevalent in the West, where all we do is think garbage most of the time. So as a quick example, I walk my dog, not enough, but I do get her out. And if you can just walk, 25 steps with no thought, you can say, "Oh, I can do that, David." It's very simple. Try it sometime. Try to be just a mechanical being rather than someone that has to constantly fill their mind. And what you think about has a great deal of effect on how you operate through life. So I don't have all the answers, Jake. I still have more questions than the answers, but I think to live in the moment and really live from the heart too. This is something that took me a long time to get to. And I remember being at a lecture many, many years ago, and there was a younger guy than me, and he really seemed to have it together. We were celebrating something he'd done and made a pretty big accomplishment in his life. And I'll never forget it. He said, "The longest journey of my life was that 17 inches. What is he talking about? And he goes, "Going from here to here." And he goes, "Since I've done that, my life has never been the same." So I think I can leave it there before I get too emotional. But I love you. I love your viewers, and I am, being a bit more forceful and more outspoken. And I appreciate you giving me the platform to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. So for everyone listening, it's themorganreport.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, especially the last part, I encourage you to listen to it again through. I think that especially that last part, I feel like that's the one thing that they don't want to have happen, because all throughout history, these battles between the new Renaissance and tyranny, whichever way they turn, um, the the cog in the wheel that stops the tyranny is always the new Renaissance, so to speak. It is the spiritual enlightenment of the people, and with the advancement of new weaponry of psychological and emotional warfare, the whole game is to keep us trapped in not only in the monkey mind, but keep us trapped in just a fight or flight fear based state that traps us into lower dimensions of consciousness, and detaches us from our true self, our connection to something greater, our spiritual identity, which is really what the entire anti-human movement is all about. And so I appreciate, your final thoughts there, and I want to thank you for your time, and yeah, I've really enjoyed, and I'm really grateful to call you a friend.
Thank you.
So for everyone listening, make sure you hit the like button on this video. Give us a comment right there down below to help the good old fashioned algorithm on this channel. You'll see the Morgan Report right there down below. Go ahead, give it a click. If you aren't signed up, fantastic newsletter covering everything from mining stocks. But David also, it's a unique newsletter because David goes a lot into his philosophical yearnings, and there's a lot of depth to it, but beyond just, hey, here's a good mining stock and here's what's going on. So yeah, I know you'll really enjoy it. So that's right there down below. We want to thank our sponsor, which is Vizsla Silver. One of our favorite silver and gold mining stocks is Vizsla Silver. Make sure you hit the bell notification, subscribe on the channel, and we will see you next time.